Hello and welcome to Press TV's News Analysis. I'm Marzia Hashimi. Thanks so much for being with us. Well, set to hit every major city on the eastern coast of the United States. Hurricane Irene is a large storm, but not nearly as powerful as the devastating Hurricane Katrina, which hit the southern parts of the country 6 years ago. All eyes are on the U.S. to see if this time around preparations and management are in place, unlike it was for New Orleans. But already there are some remnants of New Orleans 2006.
Horror in the densely populated East Coast, home to 65 million Americans. Irene left hundreds of thousands of Americans without electricity in North Carolina and Virginia. Thousands of flights were canceled while millions were ordered to leave their homes. Hospitals evacuated patients, and New York's mayor warned the city would fail to evacuate residents if the weather worsened. For the first time in its history, New York City shut down its entire mass transit and subway system. Hurricanes have caused heavy damage to U.S. economy in the past. Back in 2005, Hurricane Katrina killed more than 1,800 people and caused over $80 billion in damages. The U.S. government was criticized for mismanagement and lack of leadership in its response to the deadly storm and its aftermath. 6 years after the disaster, many victims in New Orleans, Louisiana, and Mississippi are yet to be compensated by the government.
Well, I'd like to welcome my guests for the program. First of all, Press TV's correspondent from New York is going to be joining us to fill us in. That's Susan Medeiros. And then from Chicago, writer and radio host Stephen Lindman. Thank you so much for being with us. Starting this off, and Susan. Now, Susan, fill us in on the latest that you have there.
I think that, Marzia, everyone has heeded to Mayor Michael Bloomberg's call. The evacuation zones have been evacuated to an extent. The streets, you can see a few people walking around. We haven't seen Irene hit us right yet here in New York City. However, we're seeing a lot of high winds, scattered rain showers, and we're, as I said, expecting, hoping for the best, but expecting the worst, as the saying goes.
Okay, and so basically people have heeded with the evacuations. And Susan, as far as expectations at this point in time, because of course we know after hitting North Carolina, it can continue to stay on land, and of course it would weaken. What are the possibilities that also it could go back into the ocean and take an even harder hit on New York? And what are the preparations as far as what the city has been saying about these different possible scenarios?
Well, the city has been as prepared as it can be. As you know, this is not a region here on the East Coast that's very prone to a natural disaster like a type 1, 2, or 3 hurricane, notably like one like Irene. If you recall, just a few days ago, we had a very minor earthquake, which had itself caused a lot of commotion, which also caused a lot of sarcasm from other parts of the United States as well. So, you know, we have to take into consideration that this is not a region that's very well prepared and very accustomed to hurricanes like these. As far as preparations go, in New York City, there are centers and emergency centers. They have been set up for possible emergencies that are going to head our way. Evacuation has been ordered. And also, there are, members of the Red Cross, the police department patrolling. But, like I said, the problem right now at this point in time is considering the fact that we're not very used to and accustomed to weather conditions like these. We have to basically see what's going to happen with each passing day.
All right. Stay with me, Susan, please, and switch over to Chicago. Writer and radio host Stephen Lindman, thanks so much for being with us. Now, Mr. Lindman, there have already been actions reminiscent of Hurricane Katrina, as New York has ordered evacuation. 12,000 prisoners on Rikers Island, a vulnerable location, have not been moved. Why would you think that the authorities would not evacuate these prisoners?
Well, the authorities care about the rich and powerful. They don't care about the poor. They don't care about prisoners. Let me say this. I grew up in Boston. I went through a couple of hurricanes. Boston is more vulnerable than New York. The hurricanes are nasty business. I remember the ones that I went through was nasty business, but there was not mass destruction. I was very young. I was a boy, so it's very hard to recall exactly what happened. But I don't recall, this was way before the age of television, but I don't recall reports of a lot of injuries and deaths and mass flooding. My best guess is New York will get a lot of wind. There'll be some damage, but probably the effect overall compared to New Orleans will be minimal. Let me say this about New Orleans. Katrina was a seminal event in my life. Why? I've been to New Orleans. I've visited several times. I've never lived there. Katrina made me a writer. I wrote my first article ever on the aftermath of Katrina. Why? Because of what this country did to the poor people, the poor black people, the poor vulnerable people in New Orleans that they allowed to be devastated because they wanted them ethnically cleansed. They wanted that valuable land that they resided on, that they lived on for generations. They wanted it to be cleared, to be cleansed, so developers could move in and build valued properties at high prices and earn big, big profits. Katrina changed my life. I wrote several times about it in the aftermath. It's been a while, but I remember it well. Let me add also that many years in advance, there were 3 predictions about major disasters that would strike America. Oh, do I remember this. One was a terrorist attack on New York. It happened. Second one was another devastating earthquake striking San Francisco. The last one was in 1906. It leveled vast parts of the city. The equivalent of that one today would really be a catastrophe much worse than in 1906. And the third one was called the most inevitable of all, a major hurricane and flood striking New Orleans. Why? Because the Gulf area is hurricane prone. New Orleans is below sea level. It was a guaranteed disaster to happen. It was allowed to happen. Not only that, it's possible it was manufactured to happen.
All right.
America
Stephen, let me jump in here, because that would be definitely a whole nother program that we hopefully we'll get to that and actually talk about that in another program. But let me switch over to Philadelphia, where David Lindorff is joining us, author and investigative journalist, by phone. Thanks so much for being with us. Now, according to the ACLU, in the Orleans Parish Prison during Hurricane Katrina, prisoners as young as 10 were left in their cells as their guards left their posts, and the building was plunged into darkness with no ventilation and rising sewage water. What has the U.S. learned from that experience of Katrina if once again prisoners are being left behind?
Well, probably not too much, but I think one thing you are seeing is that politicians are overreacting to this storm. I mean, it's a Category 1, for Pete's sakes. It's barely a hurricane, and you've got governors in every state declaring statewide emergencies where there isn't even going to be a hurricane, because nobody wants to be accused of being Bush and, that non-response that we saw in the case of Katrina. So everyone's overplaying it. The other thing that's happening is that the media in this country, which is all commercial, is hyping this storm incredibly.
Why do you think
it sounds like the worst thing that ever happened to the East Coast.
Yes,
in fact,
I've been monitoring it.
That serious.
I've been monitoring that, David. Why do you think that is the case? It seems to be, yes, an awful amount of hype in talking about this storm.
Well, I wondered about that. I was listening to a right-wing radio talk show last night, and the host was saying that the news media, his own included, had hyped the earthquake, which was also not a big deal. And you certainly would know that in Iran, a 5.8 earthquake is not a big deal. But they made it sound like it was, the 8-point earthquake or 9-point earthquake that happened at Fukushima. And then we had this hurricane coming, which they're making out to be as though it were a Category 5 when it's really a Category 1 or at best maybe a Category 2. And I think that, as I was listening to that, the guy was saying, we in the media take advantage of these things to try to boost ratings. And I thought, yeah, you do the same thing with terrorism too. But they don't say that. It's the same kind of thing, though, they keep Americans in a state of panic and anxiety all the time over things that aren't really that significant or serious.
All right. Well, what about that, Stephen Lindman, what David Lindorff has just said? There does seem to be a whole lot of hype about this. And I was actually wondering, because I am a person from the Gulf Coast area, so I know about major hurricanes, and that really this one is not so major. And once it hit landfall, usually it's going to slow in speed and slow in intensity. So what's your take on all this? Why does it seem that it has become just a major storm as far as the media perspective and also the way the politicians are reacting?
Well, again, I agree with Dave. Dave, it's good to be on with you. It seems to be a preoccupation in this country to stoke fear about whatever the politicians or the media want to focus on at the moment. So New York is a big deal. The hurricane is puny. And again, I can't recall a hurricane hitting anywhere in the East Coast. I may be wrong on that, Dave. You could correct me. Catastrophic. I forget. I get the names mixed up. Becky or whatever. Has there been a catastrophic hurricane hitting the East Coast in the last generation? There certainly has been down in Florida and in the Gulf Coast, but I don't recall a catastrophic one ever hitting North Carolina, Virginia, New York, my hometown of Boston, that sticks way out, jets out into the Atlantic. And I went through a couple in Boston and came through it very fine, had to stay indoors, had to hunker down. I don't remember any problem in the aftermath, but again, they make a big deal out of nothing. And of course, we're talking about New York City. We're not talking about New Orleans. Who cares about New Orleans? Everybody cares about New York. That's where the big corporations are based. That's where Wall Street is based. So let's pay a lot of attention to that. Don't worry about the poor black people in New Orleans.
Does it really make a difference, Steve, where a person will live in the United States as far as the reaction at, say, different emergencies that have taken place? You've brought up New Orleans a number of times. Does it really make a difference as far as how Washington reacts depending on the makeup, and many say the racial makeup of the city?
Oh, it makes all the difference in the world. If a major storm were threatening downtown Manhattan, downtown Wall Street, my God, they'd have the Marines out protecting the area. But if the same storm were hitting New Orleans or poor areas anywhere along the coastal areas of America, the reaction of the politicians would be literally, who gives a damn? Let it happen. Maybe we can get these people out of there, and then we can use their land for what we really want it for, upscale development to make money on. The aftermath of New Orleans to this day has been horrific, absolutely horrific. The people have been harmed so much. The city is much whiter, far, far fewer blacks. Over 100,000 people, black people, were ethnically cleansed and never allowed to come back home again, let alone compensated for their loss of property. Public schools were decimated. They were privatized. They're called charter schools, kind of a hybrid between privatization and public schools. This went on and on throughout what happened in the city. There was an expression I remember hearing about New Orleans. There was a desire to Disneyfy the city because it's a big tourist spot, and if you live there, you know Well, they've done a lot more Disneyfication of New Orleans. I've been to Bourbon Street. I've seen the French Quarter. I was not there for Katrina, and I haven't been there in a couple of decades. But the idea is use it for profit making, get the people out of the way who don't serve the profit-making interest, and let's turn it over to the people who can benefit from it. Again, you get to a city like New York, Philadelphia, Boston, it's a big deal. The authorities will take good care of those cities.
All right, David, now, during the financially challenged time that the United States is going through right now, even though you say that they are overreacting with the situation, I want to look at, as far as the cost, because whether they're overreacting or not, of course, all of this has a cost and a very sensitive time financially for the United States. What kind of effect could this storm possibly have on the financial situation there?
Well, I have an ironic view of it. You know, there are economists who are arguing, I think correctly, that the United States is doing exactly the wrong thing in trying to cut back on budgets when what it really needs to do is create jobs by stimulus spending. And so the best thing that could happen right now would be for massive damage to be caused by the hurricane, and then the government would be forced to fund, the reconstruction of whatever devastation has occurred. So, this could be the stimulus expenses that the economy really needs. They could force them to do the right thing in spite of themselves. But the other thing I would say, just a slight twist on what Steve said, is I lived in New York when President Ford basically said New York should go to hell, and he wasn't going to help them with their bankruptcy. And I think what you see is that, you have a Democratic president who has to win in New York and in Pennsylvania, which means that he has to win in New York City and in Philadelphia. So you will find those cities lavished with federal emergency aid money, because those are, 90% Democratic registration in both those cities. And so they clearly will get plenty of federal money when all this happens.
So is it about party lines, David, in your perspective, as far as who gets what, even during a national emergency?
No, I don't think it's that simple. I mean, New Orleans was really a largely Republican vote, or at least Louisiana is. So when Bush ignored Louisiana, I think the initial cause of that was simply his inept governance. He was out campaigning in Arizona when the hurricane struck, and he didn't want to interfere with his campaign stop and his money raising. But I think, what Steve talked about later, the destruction of the minority communities that gave such character and life to the whole city of New Orleans, was a deliberate policy of taking advantage of the situation to try to drive out most of the black population.
What has been learned, if anything, David, staying with you, from this situation, from Hurricane Katrina?
Well, I think, I think you'll see FEMA responding much faster than it did that's the Emergency Management Agency, much faster than it did then. At that time, FEMA was really nothing but a cesspool of patronage jobs from people who gave a lot of money to the Republican Party. Now FEMA is probably a bit more professional than it was then, and has learned some lessons from its ineptness at that time. But still, we're facing the same problem that in the past, decades ago, the National Guard was an organization of, part-time soldiers who were available for national emergencies. And now, of course, they're all posted overseas in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, which was also true in the Katrina situation. I think 2/3 of the National Guard in Louisiana was posted in Iraq at the time the hurricane hit. And those guys were going crazy because their families were, underwater, and they wanted to be there to help and couldn't. And the same situation is true now in New York and Pennsylvania, and I'm sure especially in places like North Carolina and Virginia, which are very military oriented. So they've got a lot of their guard and they're not on duty.
All right, let me get Stephen back in on this. Almost out of time. What about that, Stephen, what Dave has just said? The effect of all of these the military involvement of the United States, first cost-wise and manpower-wise, the effect that it has on the way that Americans can respond to, for example, emergency situations.
Oh, very definitely. And can I also just emphasize what Dave said about destruction from natural disasters being a great stimulus? There's a great line from Gone with the Wind, 1939, Clark Gable playing Rhett Butler, and his line was something to the effect that it's a lot more profitable to destroy than to build up. The last line, the last words he said were to build up. It is a lot more profitable. Stimulus, you could really generate an awful lot of activity when you've got things needed to be rebuilt. But we are in a state of unreadiness. We've sent the last bastion of defense, most of them, to fight foreign wars, instead of leaving them at home for what they're supposed to be, to take care of natural disasters when they come up, to protect the American people. Most of them are gone, and even the ones that have come home, they've been there before, they came home, they were sent back again, they're spent. They're spent. And now you want to send them out to defend New York City? I mean, these guys have to be thinking, what on earth do they want from me? Why don't they just leave me alone? Well, you know, I mean, you get the police. Cities like New York, Philadelphia, they've got large police forces. Chicago has a large police force. They can do plenty of defending on their own. And you can get some National Guard troops to come in and help. But again, I think when all is said and done, we'll find out tonight, we'll find out tomorrow. I think it'll be a lot of bluster and not a lot of destruction. So it'll be a tempest in a teapot, as we say here.
Okay.
I don't expect a lot to come out of the New York hurricane.
All right. And on that note, I thank you, Stephen Littman, a writer and radio host in Chicago. Also from Philadelphia, David Lindorff, author and investigative journalist, and our very own Press TV correspondent, Susan Madaris in New York. And as always, viewers, we thank you for being with us. Join us, same place, same time tomorrow for a look at one of tomorrow's top headline stories. I'm Marzieh Hashemi, signing off for myself and all the crew right here in Tehran. Thanks so much and goodbye.